Hi everyone, this video is part 4 of the Cognition unit. I will be going over just the theorists and the different perspectives on intelligence. And so I will get started by just talking about intelligence in general. So oftentimes we refer to intelligence as our mental abilities. A lot of times students think of this as academic, but usually intelligence, and that doesn't mean it is limited to academics, but intelligence is widely just referred to as the mental abilities to problem solve and adapt to new situations, and that often lends itself to doing well in academics. But intelligence is sometimes framed by our cultures and by our worldviews, and so intelligence in the Western world is different oftentimes than intelligence in other places, and maybe I shouldn't even say the Western world, but the developed world. In places where academics isn't necessary, intelligence would be viewed differently. In different societies, whether it's agrarian or tribal, intelligence might be interpreted as different types of abilities. But in this particular unit, we're referring mostly to the mental abilities to learn and grow and adapt and solve problems. And usually students are familiar with intelligence testing, and that is a part of this unit as well. This particular section will cover theorists, but intelligence tests just assess and examine the mental abilities of people and compare scores with one another to make predictions about intelligence. So we are going to start with an intelligence theorist by the name of Charles Spearman. And Charles Spearman was an early thinker in what intelligence was and how to measure intelligence. And Charles Spearman's theory is called general intelligence. And Charles Spearman believed that intelligence was a single factor, and that single factor was made up of a lot of different abilities, and that individuals would be assessed in different areas, but together intelligence was one entity. We actually use this type of method a lot when we're testing. If you think about the ACT uses a similar type of factor analysis where it's a statistical procedure where you take several different areas and then you come up with a single composite score. That's much like what Charles Spearman was thinking about when he was thinking about intelligence. He believed that you could score differently in different areas, but that you likely would have some similarities in those scores, showing this underlying intelligence that he called G, which was general intelligence. And if you think about it this way, it probably would be very rare for a student to take an ACT and score a 32 in one area and a 15 in another. That would be a huge discrepancy. Typically, students are scoring a few points apart in the different areas they're being tested in. And so Charles Spearman would use that same philosophy and would say, that would mean that there's this underlying intelligence underneath it all, that we could say this is your overall intelligence score when we put those factors together. And so this was something that he put together in 1904. So it's a relatively older idea, but it is something that is still prevalent in this idea of a factor analysis. There are people that disagree with Charles Spearman today on what intelligence is, because he would think that it is one entity, that intelligence is just one entity that he would call G. The way that I remember Charles Spearman is this is the memory tool I have. I think of a person throwing a spear and hitting a single target. So this man is throwing this spear, this javelin, into this straw bale out here, and it's hitting a single target, one intelligence. And so that's what I think of to help me remember Charles Spearman. The next intelligence theorist is Howard Gardner, and Howard Gardner would disagree with Charles Spearman, and Howard Gardner proposed in 1983 that there wasn't one general intelligence, but many. And so what he believed was, rather than one intelligence, that this is just your intelligence score, he believed that you could actually have intelligences and mental abilities, differing mental abilities in many different areas. And he specifically said there were 8: interpersonal, intrapersonal, bodily, kinesthetic, spatial, musical, logical, mathematical, and linguistic, and naturalist. And he believed that you could be very high in one and very low in another, and that didn't necessarily mean that you were unintelligent. You just had one area in which you were exceptional at, and that you were more intelligent in that area. And so he didn't feel like there was one score that reflected intelligence as a whole. And so he called this multiple intelligences. And he would use different evidence to support this. One thing that he would use to support this would be something called savant syndrome. And savant syndrome is a situation that occurs on the autism spectrum. Not everyone with autism is a savant, but it can occur in the autism spectrum, where someone might have some pretty severe deficits in certain areas, but then exceptional abilities in another. And so a savant would be someone who has one ability that widely surpasses the rest. That it could be math computation or drawing, but it is far above average. And so he would say that person would really struggle on a general intelligence type of test where you come up with one intelligence score, because they might score really poorly in a lot of areas, but then excel in others, and it might not actually represent their intellectual abilities. And so that would be one piece of evidence that he could use to support this idea of multiple intelligences. He could also use brain damage as a situation where there could be a deficit in one area that's impairing one area but not hindering others, and therefore how would that person score on an intelligence test? It might not reflect their intellectual ability if it was averaged into one score. And so the way I remember Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences is I think of garden rows, and I think of 8 rows. And in this garden of 8 rows, I think of them as the 8 different ways you can show intellect, and some might be taller and higher than others, and some might be shorter than others. And in my mind, that helps me remember Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory. The next one is Robert Sternberg, and just like Howard Gardner, he is more of a contemporary psychologist in thinking about what intelligence is. And he also, like Howard Gardner, takes a similar approach. He critiques Charles Spearman's idea of one intelligence. He feels like one intelligence doesn't adequately represent what intelligence is. And so Robert Sternberg believes that there are 3 broad areas of intelligence and not a single one area. So he actually boils it down to 3, as opposed to Howard Gardner has 8, a vast variety. Robert Sternberg has 3 broad categories, and these categories are analytical, which this would be the problem solving. You might think of this as like school smart, the academic type of smart. So that would be one area he would say that you could show intelligence. He also says there's another area called practical intelligence, in which you might have this common sense, this ability to apply knowledge, this street smart type of intellect. And then a third intellect he believes is creative intelligence, which allows you to have these abilities to come up with new and novel and innovative ideas. And so he believed that rather than 8, like Howard Gardner, that there were more than one way to understand intelligence, but just 3. He created this in 1985. He called it the triarchic theory of intelligence. And again, it was just this critique of the idea of one general intelligence. I remember Robert Sternberg because I think of him as a contemporary like Howard Gardner, where he doesn't believe in one general intelligence, but he is more stern. As you can see, Boss Baby right here is stern. He's like, no, we need to narrow this down. 8 is too many. We need to narrow this down to 3 intelligences. And so I think of his name, Robert Sternberg, and that's what helps me remember the triarchic theory, that he believes there are 3 realms to show intellect or intelligence. So this actually ends the slideshow on theories of intelligence. So the 3 main theories that you need to be familiar with are Charles Spearman's general intelligence, Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences, which there are 8, and then Robert Sternberg's triarchic theory of intelligence, in which he believes there are 3 ways to exhibit and show intelligence. I hope this was helpful. Definitely reach out if you have questions.